Hello everyone! Welcome to Blender for All. I'm Nathan Adams, happy to be your host. In this episode, I'm going to do a basic introduction to Blender, the open source software which allows you to do really awesome 3D creation. You do creation, animation, whatever you want to do. So let's get started.
Okay, let's begin. This is Blender 2.72, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and hit escape. Alright, now we're in our default scene. What we need to do is we need to delete that cube. So press X or delete, and that will get rid of that cube. Alright, we've deleted our first object. Next, let's make a new object. What we're going to do is we're going to press Shift A, and what that does is that brings up our add menu. Okay? So what we'll do is we'll do mesh, and let's do a circle. Alright? Now, what we want to do in this is that we want to make a really cool looking crown. Actually, it's not going to be really that cool looking. It'll be your first one. But anyway, so we have this circle, and you'll notice that this option comes up for add circle. You have number of vertices, 32, a radius of 1. So let's leave it as that right now. You can add or subtract as you want. What I would say is let's keep this at an even number for what we're going to do, whatever the vertices are. But we'll just keep the radius at 1. Okay, so now we have this object. Not really a whole lot we can do with it for the editing yet. But what we want to do next is that we want to get into our object mode. Alright, to enter into object mode, actually I should say we need to go into edit mode, not object mode. We can go down here, and there are all these options that come up. Object mode, edit mode, sculpt mode, all these right here, okay? So the ones that we'll mostly be focusing on are these two, object mode and edit mode. You can either go through it to here, or to make it faster, press tab on your keyboard, and it'll toggle between your object mode and your edit mode. So there you go. Okay, now that we're in edit mode, what we need to do is we need to bring up a command, which is extrude. Okay? To do extrude, we're going to press the key E. Now you'll notice that you get a new set of vertices that pull out from that old set. Well, right now it's kind of going all over the place. We can control that. So we have 3 axes right here, X, Y, and Z. On the Z axis, this will pull it straight up. There we go. So if we press Z, then that brings it up, and now we can pull it upwards. And then, taking those extruded vertices, we can deselect certain ones so that other ones point up and others stay down. Okay, so let's take it so that we have every other vertex selected. So we have one there. Zoom in a little bit so we can see this better. One there. One there. Okay. So you just want to get every other vertex. And it shouldn't be too much longer here. Alright. And then with each of those vertices selected, let's pull them up. Like so. Alright. There we go. So there are the pointed tops to our crown. And then we can deselect all of these by pressing A. If you press A, you can toggle between select all or select none. Alright. So that takes care of that step. And then we can add some other things. We can also add loop cuts, doing all kinds of cool things like that. But we'll get to that in a moment. So for the moment, let's tab out of edit mode and back into object mode. There we go. Next step, we're going to add a couple of modifiers. Now modifiers are really cool because they can take your mesh and do things to it without actually affecting your editing. So just to give you an example, here we have our properties. Okay? When we go into our properties, if we press down on our middle mouse button, you can pull this over and you'll see this wrench icon right here. This wrench is where we can go to our modifiers. Okay, so in our modifiers, we're going to add two of them. First, we'll add solidify. Now what solidify does is if you zoom on this real close, just by itself, you'll notice that there is now a thickness where if we turn off the visibility, there is none. It's at a 0 depth. Now we turn that on and it's really cool, alright? So now we have this thickness and we can also apply this, or rather what we do is we add some thickness, take away thickness, all according to what we want in this modifier. Pretty cool, right? Alright, next, let's add another modifier. The next modifier that we're going to add is the subdivision surface. Right here. Okay, you'll notice some really cool weird things that did. You'll notice that it really rounded it off, and at the same time it also shrank it down. Now for the effect that we want here, we just want these rounded parts around this, okay? We don't want the peaks to be any different. We'd like them to remain as crisp as they were. The same goes for the base. But around here, let's make it smooth. Also, you'll notice that on the shading that you see all these little facets. We don't really want to see those, so we can change the shading to smooth. Okay? Now, what we'll do is we're going to make some creases in here. So if we go back into edit mode, we go from object mode to edit mode. Okay? You'll notice we have all these edges everywhere. Now, what I want to do is I want to make this edge and this edge to be sharp. A very quick way to do this, we've been selecting these by doing a right click on each of these vertices before, right? We shift, right click, right click, right click, right click. But there's an easier way. We can do Alt, right click on one of the edges here, and then we have selected what is called an edge loop. Okay? Now, if I were to do the same thing here, everything's selected, but we don't want these edges right here selected. So we're going to do a switch on which selection mode we're going to use. If we press Control Tab, we go into our edge select mode, and then what we want to do is let's press A to deselect everything, Alt right click on those two edge loops, and then we're going to press Shift E, and then Shift E is going to bring this crease edge tool. Okay? So when we do that, then we can set it to 1, and then we have this edge now that's now completely creased. So let's tab out of edit mode again. Looks alright. Not too bad. But we can also do some things to it where we switch these. Okay, so I added the solidify modifier first, then I added the subdivision surface. But let's bring this one, the subdivision surfaces, to the top and see what happens. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so now we have this nicely rounded crown, and we have everything so it's nice sharp edges. Okay? Now for the next step. Okay, let's add a material to our object, okay? So let's go in to this material. It's this little ball-shaped looking thing. And then we're going to add a new material. This one we will call gold. I'm assuming you wanted a gold crown, right? Okay, so let's play around with the colors on the diffuse. Okay, so the diffuse is going to be your base color of your object. So we're going to pull down the blue so that we have more of the yellow. And then we can also scroll down on the scroll wheel to lower the value on each of those. May want a little bit of blue in it. So let's just do something like that. You have specular, and that's going to be your highlights. Okay. Now this specular, you can make it sharper or you can make it softer. Okay, so that's in the hardness. So if you increase the amount, just kind of scroll over on that, drag it over, and look what it does. Okay. So we'll do that. The intensity, we can increase it, decrease it. Okay, a lot of things you can do with it. Alright, then, right now we have this specular highlight, but you know what? It'd be really great if this gold material would reflect something, wouldn't it? I think it would. So if we go down to mirror, check that. You have these options, reflectivity. You know, you have that. You have, hold on, where was I? Okay, right here. You have reflectivity, you have Fresnel, you have depth, max distance, you have gloss. The ones that we'll look at are reflectivity and gloss. Now, it really takes a while just to go up and down seeing that preview, right? Well, instead, let's look at this crown and see it in real time as we're looking at these materials. So right now, we're in solid. We want to go to rendered. Okay, so rendered, we can see that we have a very, very, should we say subtle, very dull looking specularity. We can change that. So we can change the hardness. Okay, and it makes it a lot harder there. We can change the intensity. Okay, we can do that. And then you can look at this, reflectivity. Bump up that number. Okay, and then you start to see some reflection. Right now, because it's the only object in the window and there's sky behind it, it kind of looks transparent, doesn't it? We can change that in a moment after we change our values. But let's say we take down the gloss. Okay, and that'll soften things up as well. So play around with these values. Alright. And then let's add some other things to make it look a little bit more realistic. Alright, now let's add some complexity to the scene. Now keep in mind that this object is going to be our focal point. Okay, we just want to look at this. Alright? So let's get out of this rendered mode and let's go back into solid. Okay? It'll really help so that you can see what you're doing. It's not going to bog down on your graphics card or anything like that. Okay, so let's add a plane, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to get Shift A. So that's how we do our add. Let's get mesh plane. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edit mode by pressing tab, and then I'm going to scale it up. Now you notice right now I have these things that can move it, okay, but I don't have these things that can scale it. I can just press S to scale, or I can do this tool where if you look down here you can see that there's an arrow, there's this thing that does rotate, okay, so you do that, or you have the scale one, you do that, right? But honestly, I like to keep it in the move mode and then just press S to scale. Typically I'll just do it uniform. So anyway, S to scale, and let's scale it up 16. We can type in 16. Okay, tab out of edit mode. Now, let's look at it with a rendered background. Again, now we're starting to see some reflection of this plane. Okay, But then it also could be the sky. The sky and the plane are honestly, they look like they're the same color. So let's add a little bit more depth to the world in the background. So let's go to this tab that right here, it looks like it's a little globe, if you can see that closely. Okay. Now right now, we have our horizon color, which is going to be our base color. Let's change that from the gray that it is. Quite drab, isn't it? Let's add a blue to it. Okay. Pretty brilliant blue, so we can add some subtlety to it by adding some more green and some more red. Now we get a little variety of color on here. Okay. There we go. Something to where we have a much brighter, more blue sky. There we go. Oops. Okay. Then next, we can go to our plane, and let's give it a different color, just so it adds some variation. Okay. That plane, we'll give it a new material. Let's go ahead and hit new. And make it any color you want. Let's do something to make it really contrast. We'll do a red color. Okay. Just a little bit more. Take a little of this off. Yeah. Anyway, take these values down a little bit more. So now you have a sharply contrasting sky and ground texture. Okay. We can go back into this crown and adjust our things as we need to, because now we have a much better idea of what this is going to look like. So we can take maybe our reflectivity down a little bit so we get more of our base color. Okay. So now you start to see more of that gold showing through. Alright, and maybe you take that gloss amount back up a little bit. So it's a little less rough looking. Play around with those values until you get what you like. Okay. Anyway, that'll give you the idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so those are just a few things that we can do with our reflection. Can also bump up the intensity of our diffuse. Alright. Now, let's just stop with the material and let's add a little bit more complexity to our geometry. Okay, now let's go back into our edit mode. So if we have our crown selected, we right click on that. Okay, that's our plane. We want the crown. We hit our tab button. Alright. So right now we just have two edge loops on the top and bottom. Very, very simple. But let's add a little bit more complexity. Alright, so to do that we're going to do our edge loop tool here. So we're going to insert an edge loop by pressing Control or Command R. And you'll notice this little pink line that comes in. If we click on that, then it becomes active. It becomes this thing that we can do this slide with, okay? So we slide it, we can get more complexity to our geometry. And let's say we want it somewhere around probably the middle. We could do this. Okay. And then we could add more, but before we add more, let's scale this inward by pressing S. And then we can start playing with that. You can bulge it outward, scale it inward, do whatever you want. Okay. So let's do that. Okay. And then let's add another loop cut by doing Control R again. And we'll do it between this one and that last one that we just made. So let's put it there. Scale, let's slide it down toward kind of the base. And then let's scale it outward. Okay. There we go. Let's do another one toward the top, and this time we're not going to scale it, but we want to slide it toward the very top. Okay, that gives it a little bit more of a crease. All right. You can play with this all day, all that you want. We'll do one more and then we'll stop with this. Scale that inward. Okay. And then let's go ahead and let's get out of that. And now let's look at our rendered view again. See what it looks like now. Rendered. Something pretty easy for you. Anyway, so this gives you an idea of some of the basic editing methods that you can use for Blender. So these are some really cool things. They're the very basic things that you'll be using most often. I'd say you're probably going to be using these methods about 98% of the time that you're using Blender. So anyway, that about wraps this up for this episode. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave comments in the section below. And I hope that you enjoy doing Blender. Catch us later. Thank you. Bye.
Hey everyone, if you liked Blender for All, check out more of our episodes by subscribing for new content, or go to shemble.com or check out more of our channel. Thanks, have a great day.